and of course, he was telling me that Joe, his face was like a ghost face. Just he said, I saw these two little guys in a coffin, guys I'd never seen before, from another world. And this is not now. At that time, when I heard that story, I thought it was just the craziest thing I ever heard, because there was no Roswell. Nobody knew about Roswell. I didn't know about it. I didn't know about Frank Joyce until I talked to him in the early '90s. So I thought it was just and we were drinking beer and eating peanuts and looking at the good-looking women there in Georgetown. So, I thought nothing of it. At that time, I thought nothing of it. I thought, this is a crazy story. Joe Montoya. And when I did look it up, Joe Montoya was the lieutenant governor, and the governor was out of state, so he became the governor for that day, and he went down to Roswell. So anyway, when all this Roswell started coming in the 90s, I just remember that story.
Two little guys in a coffin.
Yes. And he said, we cannot talk about it. He said, if we ever talk about it, the government's going to come after me. So they shut up. Well, his dad, so this guy, the son I was with, that was his father. This is Chavez County, Roswell, New Mexico, 1947. Yeah. So I met this guy. Henry, welcome back to episode 4, American Talk It Up. And for the people who are watching this podcast, we just went over 5,600 viewers in our second episode. And our third episode is coming out very soon, but this is our fourth. And I want to tell you, Henry, it's exciting that you and I are developing some chemistry out there.
Man, it's like Jack Benny and who?
Who knows? Rochester.
There you go.
You're Jack Benny. I'm just Rochester. I'm just kidding.
Were those funny shows back then?
Oh, yeah. And, back when I was a kid growing up, they were the shows, Jack Benny and those people when you were growing up.
Loved them.
How about My Three Sons? What about, there was a show on Saturday mornings called My Friend Flicka, the horse show, stuff like that. How about Roy Rogers?
George Burns and Grace C. Allen.
Yeah, people don't remember that. That was a big show.
Were those great shows?
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
As a matter of fact, when I was a kid, the Donna Reed show, Fathers Knows Best, those are the shows we watched as kids.
My Three Sons with the big white dog.
Right.
I got a big white dog in my lifetime because of that show. In fact, I've had 2 big white dogs in my lifetime.
And probably one of the funniest shows of all time was I Love Lucy.
Oh, Lucy, you have some explaining to do.
Right. So those are the shows when I was growing up. Wow. Of course,
Fred and Ethel.
Yes, and back when I was in high school, Happy Days. Remember Fonz?
Loved them. Man.
Yeah.
So. And to get to meet Fonz later on in my career. What a thrill.
I got to meet, he came down to the radio station on ESPN and did a promo for us. He was in town, so I got to see the Fonz. So that was kind of nice.
You got to play with Fonz in a celebrity game at the sports stadium, then called, and about 15,000 fans there to see all of the Happy Day actors and players on that day. And I remember Fonz got mad at the opposing pitcher for we were playing slow pitch, and he threw it up in the air, barely traveling, and it came real close to the Fonz, and Fonz, I don't know to this day if he was kidding or serious. Hey, that's a little too close. I got to worry about my career. Everybody got a laugh out of it because we assumed he was playing around. But I think he was serious.
And, he comes in the studio and he goes like this. That was his thing, the Fonz.
Yeah.
The thumbs up,
It's so good to be with you.
Yeah.
I look forward to this show because Marty's always been one of my happy-go-lucky friends. The storyteller. Maybe we should change the name of the show to The Storyteller. Nobody tells a story like you, Marty.
Well, I've got a story I want to bring up today. When I will never know what it's like to walk in a black person's shoes or a Hispanic shoes because, there's prejudice out there. Who knows? I'll never know what it's like. But I will tell you this. I had a great experience with Mrs. King, Martin Luther King, his wife, and their
Wow.
son. Back when I was working at Microtech, I had a contract with the police department in Atlanta, and my name was on the contract, and it was Martin Luther Watts Jr. And then the contract went to the mayor of Atlanta. Her name was Shirley Franklin, if I'm not mistaken. She was the first woman black mayor of Atlanta, and she sees my name. And she says, "Who's this Martin Luther Watts Jr.? Why don't we invite him to the Martin Luther King birthday celebration at the Ebenezer Baptist Church in January?" So anyway, I get this call back in early December, and she said, "Would you like to be our guest to the Martin Luther King celebration?" And I said to her, "Yeah." Now, maybe she thought I was African American. I mean, I didn't say anything, but she said, "Well, we want you to be there." So they sent me a plane ticket. I flew to Atlanta, and they picked me up, and I don't know if I shocked him. Here I walk out of the limo, and there's Martin Luther Watts Jr., but they treated me with a lot of respect. I got to meet Mrs. King before she died. I actually met Martin Luther King III, and I said, and he said, "How does it feel to be a Martin Luther?" And I said, "Well, nobody forgets you." And he said, "Yeah, nobody's ever going to forget you, Martin Luther." And I said, "Yeah." And we had a great time. And you think about it, Atlanta, Georgia, there's more African-American millionaires and entrepreneurs in the city of Atlanta. And a lot of it's because they do promote entrepreneurship. So if you're African-American, Atlanta's a good town if you want to develop your own business. So that's why it pained me when I saw the riots where they're tearing up. And she got up on TV and said, "Look, this is not us. These are just thugs going out here. These are our businesses." So I'm glad she got up and said that. But with that saying, here's my story. I told Mrs. King and Martin Luther King III about my father, the original Martin Luther Watts. In 1943 to 1945, my dad was the port commander of Liverpool, England, for the United States Army. Now, in those days, the African Americans it was segregated. There wasn't integration. So they did not fight on D-Day, but all the ships, all those tanks, and all that supplies went to Liverpool to get ready for D-Day on June 6, 1944. And so my dad was in charge of all the African-American troops there in Liverpool. And, of course, at that time, John Lennon and Paul McCartney was living in Liverpool. They were still little boys at the time. And my dad was in charge of all these African-American guys. And the thing about it was, what happened was when they came to England, they had freedoms they didn't really have where they were living in America. They were able to go out to the bars and restaurants and intermingle with other people. And it created some racial tensions with the white soldiers. So my father had to decide the black guys will go out on Friday nights and Thursday. He had to alternate, so there wasn't any tension. But he understood the pain of these people. And when the war ended in Europe in 1945, they took 60,000 of them and put them on Liberty ships to Manila. At that time, they had to rebuild the port of Manila. They left Liverpool. Now remember, these guys were used to this English climate, and now they go to the equator. Now, here's the story that gives me pain. You've been to San Francisco. You've seen Alcatraz, right? So picture this picture in Manila, Philippines. They had an island like Alcatraz. You could see it from the bay. They wouldn't let the African Americans stay on the mainland. So when they got done with their jobs, they ferried them over in this little island. They put 40,000 of these guys. No air conditioning. My dad lived with these guys. It was just total hell. Can you imagine the conditions they were going through, Henry? Unbelievable. And then when they got to Manila, they had to dig a mass grave because over 80,000 Filipinos got killed by the Japanese, and they had to bury them. And, of course, the African Americans were the ones who dug the graves up. So I told that story to Mrs. King, and they said they couldn't believe it. They said, "Your dad was the original Martin Luther." And I said, "Yeah, my dad was in the troops." And then here's the story that really makes it great. My dad opened a furniture store in 1954 in Henrietta, Oklahoma. And he decided to hire these his troops. They needed jobs after the war. And of course, in Henrietta, they got so upset they boycotted, they picketed our furniture store because my dad hired these guys. And it really pained him. So I told that story to them, and they just really thought, well, that is great. And then for some reason, it was a special moment. I bonded with them. And so, you know, I understand. I will never understand what they're walking through in their shoes, but I do understand the pain. And right now in the African-American community, Henry, it's tough because some of these kids don't have mothers and dads, and you've experienced that with your mother, and you know how tough the gang wars are. You know how tough it is in these communities. It's not easy to get out of these areas. And I had a friend of mine in Chicago named Tommy Akers, and he was a African-American policeman. But he said, Marty, it was like going to a war zone. Every day something was happening. And there's always somebody, a policeman, that just loses it, like what happened in Minneapolis. The guy just lost it. And so they're under a lot of tension. So we'll never understand the complexity of what these people are going through, but I feel the pain, and I know you feel the pain for these people.
Yeah, and I can only say God bless Mom for the life that she gave myself and my sister. And unfortunately, I didn't get to know my dad very well, but Mom was Mom and Dad to my sister and myself. And motivation, my first coach ever. She motivated me. She inspired me. And she always told me, no matter what you want to do, dream about it, vision it, and go get it. And my mom was a great inspirational leader, great motivator. And she knew to get out there with the ball and glove and the bat and show me how. Even if she was faking it, she was inspiring me. And I did things in my lifetime that I'm so grateful for. Became an athlete, Little League Baseball. The glove was bigger than me. And what an experience that was for me to make my Little League team with Mom's inspiration, to be able later on to play high school football, be the quarterback of my football team, third baseman, point guard, all those things I imagined because my mom said, dream about it, think about it, and you'll live the experience. Sure enough, she was a prophet. Love you, Mom. You're awesome. Thank you for everything. And you know what? I started writing my second book here last night. And all of it, this first paragraph is about my mom and how she inspired me and how I dream and how I already really know, but my greatest days in my career are in front of me. There's no way I even think about the word retirement because of a leader like Mom. And I know you had a great mom, too. Are we fortunate?
Yeah, and you know, I want to tell this story. I was there the night when Henry became in the New Mexico Sports Hall of Fame, and my table was right next to your mom's table. And I went over there, and I was observing your mother when they got up there and they gave you the plaque to be in the Hall of Fame. I never saw a woman so proud. I'm so happy that she was alive to see it happen, because most mothers never get to see their sons.
Amen.
And you talk about a proud mother, and you know, you're very fortunate. She went to every game you did, every game you played, every time you did broadcast. She was your #1 fan, and you know, a very special woman. As a matter of fact, it just gives me tears when I saw her that night. And you got up there and you started crying in front of your mom, but it was understandable. I said, "Wow, what a man that has a woman like that in his life."
You know, I'll never forget is I kept thinking all that day, what am I going to say? And what I came up with right before being inducted into the Hall of Fame was, this isn't my award. It's that beautiful lady right there. It's her award. So during the speech, I started talking about her, and then the whole audience where Mom was right there, 800 people in the convention center, and I said, Mom, this is not mine. This is not my award. It's your award. And I said, Mom, stand up. And the whole place
went nuts.
Standing O for Mom.
Oh, God. It was a great moment. You had to be there at the convention center. Over 700 people were there. It was a magic moment for Henry. I was glad to be able to experience that with you.
And she waved. She took advantage of the moment because there's a little show time in Mom, and she waved to her standing O. So proud.
Oh, yeah.
What a moment. Thank you, all of you, for that moment that you gave Mom on that special night.
And, you think about there's two African-American friends that grew up in my neighborhood in Northeast Heights, Tommy Jewell, who became a metropolitan judge, Stan Whitaker, who's now a judge. Now, here's the thing is, we're talking about the inner city. A lot of African-American families don't have moms and dads. They had mothers and dads that loved them. It makes a big difference when your parents are there for you. And Tommy went on to law school and became a judge. So Stanley he still holds the 440 record in the 440 for, in the state track meet. He went to Sandia. But you understand how important to have a mom and dad there.
Oh.
And it keeps you out of trouble. I was fortunate when I came home, there was cookies and milk for my mother and stuff like. My dad and mother never missed a game I ever played in. My mom pushed me into literature. She ran a bookstore here on Lomas and San Pedro. And so I was fortunate, and your mom played a big part.
And the same thing. Dark outside should get us ready for school. Walk down to the bus stop, dark, get on the bus, go to work, get off work, it's dark again, come home, get off the bus, come and make dinner for my sister and I, motivate us about our school studies, and then go through the same routine every day. Wow, what a visual of my mom.
And what I miss the most is coming home for lunch for peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. When's the last time you had a peanut butter and jelly sandwich?
Better than a steak.
So that's why it's important what a lot of these African-American communities are going through because of the mothers and dad. It's tough. And that's why I'll never know how their life goes because I've never walked in their shoes. But I just can try to feel the pain, just, like you're talking about. Just feel the pain and try to understand. It's so important that you have a mother and dad. You're fortunate to have a great mother. And, of course, I was fortunate to grow up in a family where they loved you every day.
Yeah, and I hope our country gets cured immediately. And the sooner we get by this little pause in our lifetime, we're going to be a greater country. I can see great things ahead for our country. And I think there's going to be a revival taking place with our connection to God in each and every one of us individually, and maybe we'll be collectively too. But I can already feel that happening to my friends as they start thinking about their mortality and what's really important in their lives, including you, I'm sure. So it's going to be a special time in our future, and that future starts today. And
Henry, you and I, we're here for the joy of life. We're promoting love and peace. It's like that song by John Lennon, Let's Give Peace a Chance,
Yeah.
And maybe we'll play that little song, but I will tell you, Henry and I, we're here to heal people. We're here to promote love and laughter because that's the best gift we can give to anybody in this world. Don't you agree?
Amen.
No matter what color you are and where you come from, you can't beat peace and love and laughter.
In fact, right now, I'd give you a high five, but I can't because that was a great story.
Yes.
And what a lead-in to what's going on currently in our world today. Wow, we're taking a big pause, and, it's going to change us all, but it's going to change us all for the better. I can feel it.
I can, too. And we're going to wrap this up and go to the next segment, but what a great segment.
In fact, let's take a time out.
Time out.
So we can roll this commercial on Ted Baca's great plays here. Tim Baca, Ted, Judge, no offense, Tim Baca, former great athlete, and what a TV man he has been.
Oh, yeah.
Now he's our waterman, Hydro Bar. Tim Baca, he's going down as one of the greatest watermen of all times. Stay right there. Marty, great job.
All right.
Hey guys, Tim Baca here with the Hydro Bar by Kangen right here in Albuquerque. We have the healthiest water you can put in your body, and why that's important is because our body's over 70% water. So the water that we have here is an antioxidant, which helps with inflammation and all kinds of other stuff. It's also microclustered, which means it absorbs super fast, and it's a 9.5 alkaline water. It's not the stuff you're going to buy in a grocery store that has a lot of additives. So if you guys want to try the healthiest water, tell them that Henry T sent you, and I will get you guys a free gallon to try. And if you like it, then you can actually get on a monthly membership with us. And we also sell these machines for the convenience in your home or your office. And just come and see me. Tim Baca here. Thanks, guys.
Welcome back for segment 2 for American Talk It Out. That was a good segment we just had about our experiences with the African American community and everything. But let's talk about what's going on today with the virus for the Major League Baseball, the NBA, of course the National Football League, and of course the hockey's going to. It looks like they're going to have the playoffs. The hockey start pretty soon, and then this coming week is going to be the PGA Golf Tour without any fans. And right now, Major League Baseball is having a problem. The players want to be paid more, and the owners don't want to pay more.
Yeah, I think you hit it right there. Stop the greed. You're being paid jillions of dollars already, players, and the unions and your union leaders. Let's back up a little bit and find humility again. Players, managers, whomever. And let's back up and get on the level of the fans that support you to get all of that money. We're making too much money already, and here we are in an off season, and they still want to be paid big dollars. Where's the money going to come from? And the other worry I have, how are you going to put people in the stands when we have these distance restrictions? It's different. And then after the game, they don't want the players to take a shower, go to the motel after the game, or go straight home on the freeway, perspiring. Who cares? There are some major changes. But the biggest thing, I think you hit it early. Can fans actually come, senior citizens mixed with kids, and you know the literature we've read on the elderly and the youth, and how contagious that is. We have some problems. And I'm not as optimistic as you. I don't think, Marty, it can happen as easily as a lot of people who are in a hurry to get back as they picture it versus how I picture it. How do you picture it?
Well, you might be right, Henry. Here's what my thinking is. We're going to find out a lot from late June to August how this is going to work out. Because if the virus comes back and it all of a sudden it's going to affect what's going to happen in the football season. So it's going to really depend on how they handle this and if these guys are safe. And you're right. How guys like you and I, we're in that age group where we're the vulnerable ones. So we might not be able to go to these games if we had a chance to go. I think it's going to be an experience. You're right. The baseball players should just take the money. They're going to prorate it. And of course, there's going to be a lot of testing. So this is an experience that we're going somewhere it's never been before, Henry. And that's what's so. I'm optimistic, but then again, you don't know. Am I right?
Have the players lost their humility totally? Do they really feel that they can mandate all of those millions of dollars for playing the game of baseball?
Oh.
Compare your great stars when you were growing up. Mickey Mantle, Roger Maris, Yogi, whomever. Those are my favorite players. How much did they get paid? How much did we as fans love them? How much did they adore us as the fans? And the game was thrilling. I'll never forget the home run race with Mickey and Roger on the same team.
So,
wow.
You know, baseball is part of our culture. It's been with us for over 100-some years. It's part of us, and I really want baseball to have some kind of existing. I don't know how it's going to play out. You know that baseball series by Burns, you know, that great series? There was a quote by one of the guys. He said, you know what? I know one thing. 500 years from now, when they look back at the American civilization, they're going to remember three things. They're going to remember that we invented this thing called the Constitution, one of the greatest documents that any society written. And then the guy said, and then the other thing they're going to remember, we invented this music called jazz. Now, jazz is an America thing. We invented jazz. And then the third thing that they hope to remember is the game of baseball. Now, one thing about baseball, I learned you go to first base, second base, third base. How come home is not called fourth base? And you know what I was told? In life, you touch all the bases, but you come back to home, to your mom, your family, to your friends. It's home plate. That's baseball.
Wow. Never quite heard it like that.
But will they remember baseball 500 years from now? It is a game that we invented. Even though it came from cricket and rounders, but we invented this game. It's like jazz. And, of course, we invented the Constitution. And I'm hoping the Constitution is not destroyed by 500 years from now when we're gone. I hope it's still around.
Are there any parameters or any limitations to how much money athletes can make? When are they ever going to run out of money? Or are they going to, is the problem going to be on us, the fans, to keep paying these enormous ticket prices? How do we change that? How do we turn that around?
You know, remember you could go to the game and you can have popcorn and cotton candy and a hot dog. I remember going to
or 2 hot dogs.
I remember going to a Dodger game with my dad. I went to a double hitter. Don Drysdale was pitching the first game, and the second game was Sandy Koufax. And they were actually playing my old team, the Cubs. Ernie Banks was playing. And I remember my dad, for $5, we got into the bleachers for like $6. We sat out there at Dodger Stadium.
Gee.
And then my dad went over and got a Dodger dog for 50 cents. You know, those big Dodger ball dogs.
Yeah.
And that was delicious. And then I had cotton candy. And then I said, Dad, let's get some Cracker Jacks. And then at the end of the day, we had popcorn. We had Cokes. I mean, it was a wonderful experience. It was a double hitter. We were there for almost 5 hours at a baseball game at Dodger Stadium, and we were just having fun, and we talked. One thing about baseball, Henry, you can watch a game for 3 or 4 hours, but you can talk about anything.
Yeah.
Because that's why I always loved Vince Scully, because he could just describe a baseball game, and then he would say, hey, by the way, Duke Snider was in Boy Scouts in the 2nd grade. How did he know that
You know
stuff?
what? Second greatest storyteller next to Scully is you.
No way. But it's amazing. Vince Scully's doing the play-by-play, and he's describing Duke Snider in the 3rd grade, or you remember his mother's had a meatloaf, and he loved meatloaf. Now, he had all these little tidbits on every ball player, but he described the game because it was a long game, and to be a great play-by-play person like Harry Carey and Vince Scully, you had to be a good storyteller.
Yeah. In fact, that sort of a format or way to do your job was so unique. And I hope it never comes back again, because he, to me, is the consummate broadcaster, Vince Scully. Plus, he could broadcast any sport in the same mannerism. And the respect he had from players and fans, incomparable.
And, I remember watching WGN. Remember they used to watch
Yeah.
Harry Carey?
Oh.
And so I'm watching this game, and what was it? I don't think it was Jack Buck, but his sidekick was. Anyway, he was doing the game, and then about the 3rd or 4th inning, the camera shows this couple making out in center field, and then and then about the 6th inning, they go back and they shoot back to that couple, and they're still making out. And then in about the 8th inning, they go back, and the couple still making out, and Harry Carey said, folks, I finally figured it out. She's kissing him on balls, and he's kissing her on strikes. And I said, woo, and that was Harry Carey, But, you had to be entertaining, because the game's 11-4. As usual, the Cubs are getting killed, and Harry had to keep the interest going. That's what he would do.
Yeah. How about the name Dizzy Dean? Do you recall growing up, Dizzy Dean, Pee Wee Reese?
And he had a brother named Daffy Dean.
Only you would know that.
Yeah. The
Dizzy
gas-
was all-time funny.
Yeah, and he used to be play-by-play, and he used to promote that Falstaff beer, and I remember, this beer must be really good. It was Falstaff. Finally, when I was in high school, I went to a party once, and they were still selling Falstaff. And I went and I drank that stuff, and it was terrible. I almost threw up. I said, "This is the worst beer." But Dizzy had me thinking about Falstaff beer. This had to be magic stuff, but it was terrible. And and that's when we started drinking Slits. That's the way it was.
Well, Dizzy used to sing the Wabash Cannonball,
Oh yeah.
and that was one of America's favorite songs because of Dizzy. And I had a player on my high school baseball team, Bill Kaywood, funny just like Dizzy, just like you, and he had that song down. And we would request before every practice that Bill Kay would sing the Wabash Cannonball, and he would sing it, and we would always sit there with amazement how good it sounded, but he knew all the words, and Billy loved singing it for us.
And I remember when he did that, little Pee Wee Reese was his sidekick on the TV,
Yeah.
and he started humming the song. And it reminds me of Don Meredith when he did the Monday Night Football with, the Monday Night Crew, with, what's the famous...
Funny guy, him and Gifford and Cosell.
And he, at the end of the game, when the game was about over, he would sing that song, "Turn out the lights, the party's over." And I still use that when I watch the game. I used to look at my dad.
Everybody does.
Turn out the lights, the party over. And of course, back in the days when the Bulls were playing, Dick Motta used to say, "It ain't over until the fat lady comes out singing."
Yeah.
And I love that saying.
The line about the index finger. Remember that? Where it was the end of some game and some fan goes by and flips the bird, and then Meredith says, "Hey, that guy thinks we're number one."
He's number
How
one.
quick was his wit?
Oh, it was great. But when Motta used to say, "It ain't over until the fat woman comes out singing," I was always looking for that fat woman coming out singing.
Yeah.
But that was another model. Of course, Don Meredith, he passed away up in Santa Fe about 10 or 11 years ago.
Yeah.
I remember going up to see him once, and his wife was an artist. They were into the art galleries in Santa Fe, but that's where he died, Dandy Don. But those are the stories with Harry Carey. And when Harry died, over 30,000 people showed up at his funeral.
Wow.
And you go down Michigan Avenue, and they had Budweiser cans and bottles lined up because, he was the Budweiser pitch man. This Bud's for you. And that was Harry Carey. But he was a great entertainer. And I think that's part of, he told me once, the whole key of media is to entertain, make people feel good. And that's what Henry's all about. He makes people feel good. And I hope we're entertaining today on this segment.
Yeah. Well, he still amazes me. And I'm considering, but he's got all the authorities. See, it's in our contract that Marty will make all big decisions. But I'm going to try to rewrite the contract a little bit and change the name of the show, The Storyteller. But I like, yeah.
Yeah, so, if you like
Speak
this,
it up, America.
So if you're watching this segment, there's two things.
Talk it up.
Talk it up. I want you to hit the Facebook follow or like, and go to YouTube and hit the subscribe button. And then if you want to, go up to Henry T. Game Face Live and do the same thing. Hit follow and like.
You know what's amazing to me? And Marty's a humble guy, so leave it up to me. The ratings in Facebook, the number of people that are already watching the Henry T. Show and this show, it's incredible. Thank you for keeping track of us and supporting us. And hit that little button. Give us the like, whatever that thing is.
Yeah,
I don't know it like you know it, but I'm a competitor.
Yes, and we're over 6,000 views right now.
Really?
And we went from this show from 800 to 6,000, and so we're doing great. We want you to follow us. If you like these stories and like the way Henry and I look at life, and we're here to spread love and sunshine and laughter. You can't beat that.
And we got to get out the high school pictures of Marty. quick as an alley cat, fast. Woo! There was a running back named Mike Carter, and there was another one named Phil Trent. Two great athletes, sprinter, world-class sprinters for the Lobos and UTEP. But this guy could run the football like them. You know, Mike Carter was a straight up and down runner in a sprint. You couldn't beat him.
Nobody could.
But the guy that could stop on a dime, stop, and then accelerate so quickly was Marty Watts, one of the greatest Sandia High School running backs. You can name them all, but this guy's one of the greatest ever. You're a humble man, but I love to watch you run that football.
Well, thank you, Henry. That's why I'm going to church twice on Sunday. And
you were very, see, you
like,
could really run that ball.
A name like Martin Luther, I couldn't get into Catholics, but the Baptists took me in.
How quick were you?
That was one thing.
I mean, in the 100 meters.
I was never that fast. I was probably about a 10-1, 10-2, where Mike Carter could run a 9.5. The only thing I could do was run the 40. I was pretty quick, but that was one thing I was probably better than he was. I could stop on a dime, but he was the best, and so were those guys. I was maybe in high school ran a 4.6 40. The best I ever got in college was a 4.5.5.
Did you score as many touchdowns? I bet you're right up there with Mike in total touchdowns.
No, I didn't. I was not in his category. But just thinking about him, he was the best. Yeah. But, you know, we're going to end this segment. We're going to come back and talk a little bit about NBA and NFL. But I'll tell you this, Henry, these great play-by-play guys, I just wish we see more of them because they were legends. They knew how to paint a picture.
Yeah. You know who I like talking about right here? I'm in my backyard shooting hoops, or I'm in the front yard with the transistor radio pretending I'm a Lobo, and guys like Gene Osborne. Do you remember he was the original great Lobo broadcaster? And, of course, Mike Roberts showed us all how to become broadcasters. And there was another one I'll think about when we come back. Go ahead.
All right. So we're going to leave this segment. We'll come back for the last segment. Welcome back to our last segment today on American Talk It Up. You brought up Frank Joyce, the former voice of the Lobos back in the 50s and early 60s, and he was taken over by Mike Roberts, who was there for like 40 years, almost 40 years, until Robert Poitno is now the play-by-play. But I've got a Frank Joyce story about Roswell, UFOs.
Go for it.
So, in 1947, I think it was July 7th, is when they had the Roswell incident where the UFO supposedly crashed there in Roswell. And I remember Frank died about 10 or 11 years ago, but I remember seeing Frank at the Frontier Restaurant back in the 80s or 90s. I think it was around 93. And I remember him telling me that he gets a call about somebody called up, there's a flying saucer has crashed out here, and the government's going to go pick it up, blah, blah, blah. And he reports it on, at that time, KOB radio there in Roswell. And then all of a sudden, about 3 hours later, somebody from the government came by and told him he cannot do that anymore. They kind of censor him. And he knew something happened because he knew some of the people, so he had to keep his mouth shut. He did open up later in his life. But here's the thing that's really incredible. Back in 75, I was working for Pete Domenici as a summer intern. And one of the guys that worked for Joe Montoya, who was at that time the other United States Senator, Montoya, he had a guy named, I think his name was Frankie Albert, or Abeda, Frankie Abeda. I'm trying to remember his name. Well, one night after work, after our time, we went down to some bar down in Georgetown. You know, they have some beer and eat some sandwiches. It was one of these places where you had all the peanuts on the floor. And we're sitting there and we're drinking some beer, and he said to me, you know, Marty, I'm going to tell you something that's going to blow you away. Now, remember, this is 1975, I think 75. Now, at that time, nobody knew about the Roswell incident. That didn't come out until 1980s. Nobody knew about it. I even had a guy named Bobby Corn who was a state senator, and his land was part of the land of the supposedly crash. So I'm sitting there, and we're just talking. He said, "Did you know that my dad was the Democrat chairman of Chaves County back in 1947?" I said, "Well, what is 47?" He said, "You're not going to believe this. Joe Montoya was the lieutenant governor of New Mexico, and he was down at the Walker Air Force Base in 1947 to give out an award to somebody at the base. And that's when the incident happened. And so his dad picked up Joe Montoya and drove him out to the Walker Air Force Base. He said, well, I'll call you to pick me up in an hour or so, and we'll go back and celebrate, have some fun in Roswell." So anyway, about an hour later, he gets a call. This is Frankie's dad, and he said, "Look, something really nuts happened. You need to pick me up right now. Pick me up right in front of the base. I got to get out of here." And so all of a sudden, he gets picked up by his dad, and they get in a car. This is 1947. He said, "You're not going to believe what I saw." And of course, he was telling me that Joe, his face was like a ghost face. He said, "I saw these two little guys in a coffin, guys I'd never seen before, from another world." And this is not, now at that time, when I heard that story, I thought it was just the craziest thing I ever heard, because there was no Roswell. Nobody knew about Roswell. I didn't know about it. I didn't know about Frank Joyce until I talked to him in the early 90s. So I thought it was just and we were drinking beer and eating peanuts and looking at the good-looking women there in Georgetown. So, I mean, I thought nothing of it. At that time, I thought nothing of it. I thought, this is a crazy story. Joe Montoya. And when I did look it up, Joe Montoya was the lieutenant governor, and the governor was out of state, so he became the governor for that day, and he went down to Roswell. So anyway, when all this Roswell started coming in the 90s, I just remember that story.
Two little guys in a coffin.
Yes. And he said, we'll never, he said, we cannot talk about it. He said, if we ever talk about it, the government's going to come after me. So they shut up. Well, his dad, so this guy, the son I was with, that was his father. This is Chaves County, Roswell, New Mexico, 1947. Yeah. So I met this guy, and you know how all us New Mexicans, we all hung out together in Washington, D.C., because we're all New Mexicans, and we miss good green chili. And I remember his mother would send him chili from Roswell, that good green chili, and we used to eat it at lunchtime, That's the kind of stuff we had that other people in the capital didn't know about, green chili, sandwiches, and hamburgers. So I go back, and then Frank Joyce tell me about that story. Somebody calls up, and he announced it on the radio. If you look it up, if people are watching this podcast, look up Frank Joyce and his incident with Roswell. His story is Google his story. Now the Montoya story,
gave the first report.
Yes. And then he was told to shut up, or he was going to be. And nobody. But the funny thing about it, if it wasn't that Jesse, the guy that was the PR guy, he came out of the box back in the late 80s. He told the story. So I would say, what a story that is. And at the time in 1975. I thought it was a guy getting drunk and drinking. He's just making. I mean, you wouldn't even believe it, right? And I thought, man. I said, Frankie, you've had too many, who knows, Falstaff beers.
So get him some milk.
But that's my UFO story. And of course, Frank, at the end of his career, he had a TV show on fishing and hunting. He was a fly fisherman on Channel 4, NBC. But he was a great broadcaster. I think he got tired of it. Then Mike Robert came around, and Mike was the voice of the Lobos for all those years.
Yeah. Well, Frank Joyce worked a position in the production department when I was the sportscaster at Channel 4. And he'd come every day before I would get ready to go on the air. And he'd always say hello, nicest guy. And when he loved sports, and he loved the Lobos. And we'd sit there and chat about every aspect of sports for that day. And his heart was truly with the Lobos, and it was always so complimentary to me about the work that I was doing. But At the same time, I knew how much Frank loved being the broadcaster and how much he missed being the broadcaster for the Lobos. So my heart was always with him.
So he never told me, did you ever see, I never saw any of the crash stuff. He just reported it.
Yeah.
Now, the story about Joe Montoya, now I don't know if Roswell happened, but how could you make up a story like that? I mean, that's
And
something.
the way you tell it cracks me up.
Yeah,
These two little guys in a coffin.
yeah, and then the funny thing is, they go back. Joe Montoya was so shaken up. This is what his son.
Come and pick me up. We gotta get out of here.
They started drinking scotch, whiskey. They got drunk because he was so shooken up about what he saw. Now, can you imagine in 1947 if you saw that?
That would shake you up.
It would probably shake you up. Now,
Oh, yeah.
even then, even with that story, you couldn't make it up. You couldn't make up a story. But even then, I thought it was a crazy. And you know what? I forgot about it. I thought it was just it was a bunch of guys drinking some beer. But then, when all this stuff happened 15 years later, I started piecing the thing together. Now, did something happen in Roswell? I believe something did. I don't know if it was somebody from another world, but I do believe they did cover up, and I do believe something did happen. And who would make up a story about that?
You can't.
You can't.
And all the stories are so consistently close in their description.
Yeah, and so I just, and then of course Frank did say he never saw it. He just got reported, but he knew something happened big, and the fact that the government went down to shut him down, hey, you can't report on that, or we're gonna, and they did, in some ways they did kind of threaten his life. And then he leaves Roswell and comes to Albuquerque with KOB and becomes the voice of the Lobos for play-by-play. But
and every joke has been told about that incident.
Yes.
I mean, you can't invent a joke that hasn't been told about that particular day in New Mexico's history. And I like to talk when I do a Roswell Coyote game. I said, well, and their big flying saucer is parked out in the east parking lot here. And that little green guy that's the pilot, he's taking a nap. And that's one of my aspirations is to interview that guy someday. So if you've got connections with that little green guy, call me up because I'm going to be there to interview him next game. Roswell does when they come to town.
The Coyotes. And then, of course, their other high school team is Goddard. They named after the rocket developer, Robert Goddard.
Yeah.
And so they were called the Rockets.
Marty, the way you told that story is brilliant. We got to get out of here.
So we got to get out of here. But something did happen there, Henry. I'm convinced now.
Yeah.
And, and now Roswell is on the map. They even got a TV show called Roswell now.
Yeah.
So,
but there are photographs apparently that were taken that have been released or drawings or something. I saw something with those two little guys in the coffin.
So that was probably July I was there for that summer. I think it was July 1975. But I do remember that story. Now, I forgot all about it until all the stuff came back later. But what a story. And maybe if the guy wasn't drinking beer and he was loosened up and he was just wanting to chit-chat, and I asked him where he grew up, and he grew up in Roswell. And I said, yeah, we used to play those guys in football. Maybe that's why he brought the story. I have no idea, but I was there at that moment. That's all I can say. So
well, let's develop enough. Let's do our research and bring back as many facts as we can for one of these shows. Interviews and everything.
Yes.
And let's make it an event right here.
Right here
on the Marty Watts Show.
Well, the American Talk It Up. So listen, folks, we want to wrap it up. Please come up to our podcast on Facebook and YouTube. Hit the subscribe button on YouTube. Hit the button, and we're ready to go. And if you love what we're talking about, we've got more to come.
Oh, we got to get out of here.
So what is it? Asha Baba?
Ole. Thank you, Marty.